Mecca sat at the long oak table, her hands trembling as her brother Nuru laughed loudly in front of the entire family. "You," he scoffed, "you'll get nothing but scraps. The house, the business, everything belongs to me." The room filled with awkward laughter, while Mecca's eyes burned with humiliation. But what Nuru didn't know was that the lawyer seated quietly at the end of the table held an envelope that would flip his arrogance upside down. Nuru leaned back in his chair at the family gathering, his voice louder than anyone else's. He grinned, raising his glass as if he had already won something. "The house, the land, and Dad's business," he said, pointing at himself. "All of it is mine. Mecca will be lucky if she gets a spoon from the kitchen." His words cut through the room like a knife. A few relatives forced out nervous laughs, unsure whether to join him or stay quiet. Some glanced at Mecca with pity, but none spoke up for her. Mecca sat still, her hands folded tightly on her lap, though inside her chest burned. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but she knew it would only make things worse. Her brother thrived on making her feel small, and today he was enjoying every second. He leaned forward, eyes sharp with arrogance. "You were never Dad's favorite," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Everyone knows he built everything for me. You should just accept your place." The words echoed in the room. An aunt shook her head slightly, but still kept quiet. An uncle tried to change the topic, yet Nuru laughed again, proud of the humiliation he had caused. "Don't worry, Mecca," he added with a cruel smile. "When I move into the big house, maybe I'll let you visit." His tone made it clear he saw her as nothing more than a guest in the family she had given her life to. Mecca swallowed hard, her eyes lowered to her lap, refusing to let him see her tears. Silence was her shield, though her silence was not weakness. Deep down, she remembered her father's steady gaze in his final days, how he had looked at her with quiet pride. She held on to that memory like a lifeline while her brother's cruel laughter rang in her ears. The room grew heavy with tension. Some family members whispered to each other, others avoided looking at her altogether, afraid to get caught in the middle. Nuru's voice filled every corner, bold and boastful, as though the inheritance was already in his hands. He basked in the attention, while Mecca sat quietly, her dignity intact, hiding the storm within her. She did not argue, she did not fight. She let him speak, let him enjoy his shallow victory. But inside her a spark was lit, one that no laughter or arrogance could put out. This was only the beginning. All night, Mecca could not sleep. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her brother's mocking voice replaying in her head. Every word reminded her of how life had always been tilted in his favor. From the time they were children, the shadows of favoritism followed her. She remembered how their father would come home with gifts, expensive shoes, shiny watches, and even trips abroad. All for Nuru. For her, it was always a simple pat on the shoulder and the reminder to keep working hard. As a little girl, Mecca had believed that one day her efforts would be seen, that patience and hard work would make her father proud. But as the years passed, she realized the attention never shifted. Nuru was the golden child, celebrated for things he never even earned. When he barely passed his exams, their relatives praised him, calling him brilliant. When she excelled, finishing at the top of her class, it was brushed aside as expected of her. The memories rolled like waves, and she could not stop them. She remembered working at the family business from a young age, waking up early to help at the shop, keeping records, and talking to customers with a smile. She sacrificed her weekends, her holidays, everything, to make sure the business kept growing. She knew every corner of that company, every struggle, every success, and yet, no one ever clapped for her. Nuru, on the other hand, had never lifted a finger. He spent his days in luxury, driving cars bought by their father, living freely, while she carried the real weight. When there was a problem at the shop, she solved it. When employees wanted answers, they looked to her. Still, when guests came, their father introduced Nuru as the future of the business, as if she was invisible. The pain of those memories pressed on her chest. She could see herself in the background of family photos, always standing slightly apart, always the one who gave but was never acknowledged. Meanwhile, Nuru stood at the center, smiling like a king, his achievements built on her silent labor. Yet even with all the hurt, Mecca remembered one thing her father once whispered to her when no one else was listening. What is fair may not always be what people expect, but truth finds its way. That single sentence stayed in her heart, even when everything else seemed unfair. And tonight, as she lay awake, she held on to it tightly. Something inside her told her that her story was not over. The night stretched endlessly for Mecca as she lay on her bed, eyes wide open in the darkness. The house was quiet, but inside her heart there was too much noise, too many memories, too many wounds that refused to heal. She turned on her side, hugging her pillow, and let the tears she had been holding back slip down her cheeks. Her brother's words at the gathering kept echoing, cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. Yet behind all that pain, one memory rose above the rest, her father's last conversation with her. She could still see him lying weakly on his bed, his breathing slow, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and tiredness. He had asked her to sit close, and when she did, he held her hand tightly. "Mecca," he whispered, his voice faint but steady, "what's fair will not always be what people expect, but truth finds its way." At the time, she didn't fully understand what he meant. She only nodded, wiping her tears, holding his hand until it grew cold. But now, those words rang louder than ever. She thought about how her father had watched her all those years in the business, how he had quietly noticed her sacrifices even when others ignored them. He was a man who spoke little, but his eyes had often carried a depth she could not describe. Perhaps he had seen her pain, her strength, and her patience more than she realized. Perhaps those final words were not random. They were a promise. As she lay there, the silent pain pressed heavily on her chest. She remembered her childhood, her youth, every moment when she had been pushed aside, every time her brother had been lifted high while she stood in the shadows. All those times she wanted to scream, but instead swallowed her feelings and kept working. Tonight, those memories crashed together, and she finally allowed herself to cry, not out of weakness but out of release. The darkness of the room became a mirror of her life, quiet, hidden, and overlooked. Yet even in that stillness, a small light flickered inside her. Her father's words were not just a memory. They were a seed planted in her heart, waiting for the right time to grow. Mecca closed her eyes, clutching her blanket, whispering his words to herself again and again. Truth finds its way. Though her brother's arrogance had humiliated her, though her family's silence had cut her deeply, she felt a strange calm. Somewhere deep within, she knew her father's truth was still alive, and when the right moment came, it would shine through the shadows, stronger than any mockery. The days after the family gathering passed slowly, but each one carried a growing weight. Everyone in the family knew that the will was about to be read soon, and the air was thick with tension. Relatives whispered about it at every chance, and most of them believed what Nuru had shouted so boldly, that he would inherit everything. Nuru himself fueled the fire. He walked around with an inflated chest, bragging to cousins, uncles, and even neighbors about how he was about to become the new master of the house and business. He did not hide his arrogance. He began spending money he didn't even have yet, buying expensive clothes, throwing small parties, and treating friends to lavish meals. "This is just a taste," he would say proudly. "When the will is opened, everyone will see who the true heir is." His friends cheered for him, and even some family members joined his celebrations, hoping to stay close to him for favors once he officially gained power. To them, Nuru's confidence was proof enough. But behind the noise of his bragging, Mecca moved quietly. She kept her routine, visiting the family business every day, making sure things continued to run smoothly. Employees respected her, though they too assumed Nuru would soon take control. Still, she did not argue, she did not correct them. She simply smiled and did her work, her silence hiding the storm inside her. She remembered her father's words, and held them close like a secret shield. When relatives gathered, Nuru mocked her openly again. "Enjoy your little chores while you can, Mecca," he would say, smirking. "Once I take over, you can finally rest. Maybe I'll even give you a small allowance." The relatives laughed uncomfortably, but no one challenged him. Mecca only looked at him calmly, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. Her calmness made some people wonder, but Nuru took it as proof that she had already accepted defeat. The day of the will reading was announced, and excitement buzzed through the family like electricity. Nuru boasted even louder, acting as though the event was nothing more than a formality. He even told his friends to come celebrate afterward, promising a grand feast. Mecca, however, remained steady. She did not shout. She did not explain herself. She did not reveal the memory of her father's words that gave her strength. She simply prepared herself quietly, knowing the storm was building, and when it broke, the truth would speak louder than Nuru's arrogance ever could. The morning of the will reading came with heavy skies, as if the day itself understood the weight it carried. By noon, the house was crowded. Relatives filled the living room, their voices low, their faces carrying a mix of excitement and greed. Everyone wanted to know how the late patriarch's wealth would be shared, but most had already decided the outcome in their hearts. Nuru would walk away with everything. Whispers floated around the room, some congratulating him in advance, others asking him what plans he had for the business once it became his. Nuru smiled confidently, enjoying every second of the attention. Then the door opened, and the lawyer entered. He was not just any lawyer but an old family friend, a man who had known their father for decades. His hair was graying, his suit neat, and in his hand was a thick brown envelope that instantly caught everyone's eye. The room grew quiet as he stepped inside, his expression calm and serious. He greeted the relatives politely, shaking hands, and then placed the envelope carefully on the table. Everyone stared at it as though it was a treasure chest about to be unlocked. Mecca sat at the far end of the room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She tried to steady her breathing, but her heart pounded against her ribs. She remembered her father's words again. Truth finds its way, and she clung to them like an anchor. She felt the eyes of her relatives on her, some filled with pity, others with scorn, as if she was only there to watch her brother claim victory. Nuru leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing on his lips. He spoke loudly. "Well, let's not waste time. We all know why we are here." A few chuckles followed, and some nodded in agreement. The lawyer ignored the interruption, calmly arranging his papers and preparing to begin. His silence alone commanded respect, and slowly, the room grew still again. Mecca's palms grew damp, and she pressed them against her dress to hide it. She did not move, did not speak, but inside her, emotions swirled, fear, hope, and anticipation all colliding. She could almost feel her father's presence in the room, watching quietly, as he always did. As the lawyer finally cleared his throat and opened the envelope, every pair of eyes in the room fixed on him. The relatives leaned forward, eager for confirmation of what they thought they already knew. Nuru's smile widened, certain that his victory was about to be sealed. And Mecca, though silent, sat straighter, ready for the truth her father had promised would one day come to light. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to speak. The silence in the room was quickly broken by Nuru's loud voice. He leaned forward in his chair, grinning broadly. "Before we even start," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance, "maybe Mecca should start packing her bags. After today, she won't have a place in this house." His words hung in the air, sharp and cruel, and several relatives chuckled nervously, glancing at one another. Some smirked openly, already imagining him as the new master of everything. The lawyer tried to continue, his voice calm as he opened the first page of the will, but Nuru would not stop. He waved his hand dramatically, cutting him off. "Let's be honest, uncle," he said mockingly to the lawyer. "This is just a formality, right? Everyone knows Dad left it all to me. The house, the land, the business. It's no secret." Laughter erupted from a few cousins who nodded eagerly, encouraging his performance. Mecca sat quietly, her eyes lowered, though her heart raced inside her chest. Each word felt like a knife, but she refused to let him see her pain. She stayed still, her face calm, though her silence only made Nuru bolder. "Don't worry, little sister," he continued with a sneer. "When I move in as the new owner, maybe I'll let you stay in the guest room, if you behave." His friends and some relatives chuckled again, enjoying his cruelty as though it was a show meant for their entertainment. The lawyer cleared his throat, urging for order, but the atmosphere had already shifted. The tension in the room was thick, pressing against every corner. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, torn between amusement and unease. They knew Nuru's words were harsh, but none of them dared to speak up for Mecca. In their eyes, she was already the loser, the one without a voice. Nuru leaned back, arms crossed, still grinning. "This won't take long," he said loudly. "Soon everyone will know the truth. And Mecca, you can finally stop pretending like you matter here." His words cut through her, but Mecca only sat taller, refusing to crumble. She felt her father's words echo inside her, a quiet reminder that truth always finds its way. The lawyer finally raised his hand firmly, his voice stronger this time, demanding silence. The laughter faded, but the damage was done. The room was heavy with tension, every eye bouncing between Nuru's arrogance and Mecca's quiet strength. The moment felt unbearable, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the truth that was about to be revealed. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, the weight of the envelope still heavy in his hands. The room was tense, every eye locked on him, waiting. Nuru leaned back with a smug smile, certain that the words about to be spoken would crown him the new master of everything. But when the lawyer began to read, his calm voice carried a truth no one expected. In the matter of my estate, the lawyer read slowly, I, the late Mr. Okoro, state clearly and without doubt. The room leaned closer, breaths held. Then came the words that split the air like lightning. I leave the family house, the land, and full control of the business not to my son, Nuru, but to my daughter Mecca. This decision is made in recognition of her loyalty, her years of hard work, and the countless sacrifices she made for this family. The words fell heavy, and for a moment, no one moved. Nuru's smile froze, his jaw dropping as though he had not heard correctly. His confident posture crumbled, and his hands clenched tightly against the arms of his chair. The laughter that had filled the room earlier vanished into stunned silence. The relatives who had chuckled at his jokes now sat with wide eyes, their faces shifting from amusement to shock. Mecca's breath caught in her throat. She looked up slowly, her eyes blinking in disbelief. For so long she had been invisible, treated as though her work meant nothing. But here in black and white, her father's truth had spoken louder than all the years of silence. Her heart pounded as the lawyer continued, confirming every detail. Furthermore, the lawyer added, it is my wish that Mecca be given the full respect of this family, for she has carried its weight when others did not. The room was so quiet it felt as if time had stopped. A cousin coughed nervously, and an aunt shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding Mecca's gaze. The same people who had laughed at her humiliation earlier could not bring themselves to look her in the eye now. Nuru's voice finally broke through, trembling and sharp. This must be a mistake, he stammered. But even as he spoke, his face betrayed his fear. The lawyer calmly shook his head, holding up the signed document for all to see. There was no mistake. In that single moment, everything changed. The arrogance, the mockery, the favoritism. All of it collapsed under the weight of the truth. The silence in the room was louder than any voice, and for the first time, all eyes turned not to Nuru, but to Mecca. Nuru sat frozen in his chair, his face drained of all color. Just moments before he had been laughing the loudest, certain the spotlight belonged to him. But now the lawyer's words echoed in his ears like a cruel twist of fate. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Then he stammered, his voice shaky. No, this can't be right. Read it again. You must have made a mistake. The lawyer remained calm, holding the document firmly in his hand. There is no mistake. These are your father's signed wishes. His tone left no room for doubt. Nuru's eyes darted around the room, desperate for someone to support him. But the same relatives who had cheered him on moments earlier were suddenly silent. Their smirks were gone, replaced with uneasy glances. Some shifted in their seats, embarrassed for having believed his empty boasts. For the first time, all eyes turned toward Mecca. She had not moved from her seat, but the quiet strength in her posture now spoke louder than anything else. Relatives who once dismissed her began to see her differently. The respect they had withheld for years now surfaced in the way they looked at her, hesitant at first, but undeniable. They remembered the hours she had given to the family business, the sacrifices she made without complaint. Suddenly, the truth was clear, and no one could deny it any longer. Nuru's laughter had died completely. His hands trembled as he slammed them on the table. This isn't fair, he shouted, but even his anger sounded hollow. The power in his voice was gone. He looked like a man stripped bare, exposed in front of everyone he had tried to impress. His arrogance, once towering and untouchable, collapsed piece by piece in the silence that followed. An uncle who had chuckled at his jokes earlier now shook his head in disappointment. An aunt who had sided with him avoided his eyes completely. It was as if the entire room had shifted in an instant. No one was standing with him anymore. The more he tried to fight the truth, the smaller he seemed, while Mecca, sitting quietly, only grew stronger in their eyes. Nuru's chest rose and fell quickly, his pride crumbling under the weight of reality. For years he had been spoiled, praised, and carried on a throne built by favoritism. But now, in front of the very people who once fed his ego, he had nothing. His arrogance, the thing he had worn like a crown, had turned to dust before everyone's eyes. And as silence filled the room again, it was clear to all. Mecca had won the respect he had always claimed but never truly earned. The room was still heavy with silence when Mecca finally lifted her head. Her eyes met those of her relatives, one by one, and she could see the shame and unease written across their faces. For years, they had overlooked her, joining Nuru in mocking her silence. But now, the truth had shifted the air, and all attention rested on her. She took a slow breath, her voice steady and calm as she began to speak. "Respect," she said softly, yet her words carried through the room, "is not given to the loudest voice. It does not belong to the one who shouts or boasts. Respect belongs to the one who works, who sacrifices, who builds quietly even when no one is watching." Her tone was not bitter, nor was it angry. It was filled with strength born from years of endurance. The family listened closely, many lowering their heads in shame. Nuru tried to interrupt, but his voice cracked, and no one backed him this time. Instead, they turned back to Mecca, their eyes filled with a new recognition. She continued, "I never needed applause, and I never asked for praise. I did what I did because it was right, because this family and this business mattered. And now, the truth has found its way, just as Father said it would." The lawyer, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat and spoke firmly. "Let me make it absolutely clear. This inheritance is legally airtight. Every document is signed, every instruction sealed by your father's hand. There is no room for argument." He placed the papers on the table with certainty, his voice leaving no space for doubt. Relatives exchanged glances. The same people who had once laughed at her now nodded slowly in respect. An older uncle spoke under his breath, almost as if confessing, "She deserves it. She has always deserved it." Others followed with quiet agreement, their eyes softening toward her. The tide had turned completely. Mecca sat with grace, her presence stronger than ever. She did not gloat, she did not throw her victory in anyone's face. Instead, she allowed her calm dignity to speak for her. The shift in the room was undeniable. Those who had once seen her as invisible now saw her as the rightful heir, the leader who had earned every bit of what was given to her. In that moment, respect, the very thing she had been denied all her life, finally belonged to her. Not because the will had declared it, but because the truth had made it impossible for anyone to ignore her worth anymore. Mecca rose slowly from her seat, her movements calm but powerful. The papers still lay on the table, but she did not need to look at them. Her eyes locked on her brother, the one who had spent years mocking her, belittling her, and laughing at every effort she made. For the first time, he could not meet her gaze. His shoulders slumped, his arrogance gone. The room felt heavy with the weight of truth, and every eye followed Mecca as she took a step closer. "You mocked me," she said firmly, her voice steady, clear, and unshaken. "You mocked me for what you thought I didn't have. You believed silence meant weakness, and patience meant failure. But now you see, everything you underestimated in me was my strength all along." Her words cut through the silence like a blade, leaving no room for defense, no space for excuses. Nuru's lips trembled, but nothing came out. For the first time in his life, he had no words. The relatives who once sided with him now stared at Mecca with awe. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, ashamed of how easily they had joined in his arrogance. Others lowered their eyes completely. Glances. The same people who had once laughed at her now nodded slowly in respect. An older uncle spoke under his breath, almost as if confessing, "She deserves it. She has always deserved it." Others followed with quiet agreement, their eyes softening toward her. The tide had turned completely. Mecca sat with grace, her presence stronger than ever. She did not gloat, she did not throw her victory in anyone's face. Instead, she allowed her calm dignity to speak for her. The shift in the room was undeniable. Those who had once seen her as invisible now saw her as the rightful heir, the leader who had earned every bit of what was given to her. In that moment, respect, the very thing she had been denied all her life, finally belonged to her. Not because the will had declared it, but because the truth had made it impossible for anyone to ignore her worth anymore. Mecca rose slowly from her seat, her movements calm but powerful. The papers still lay on the table, but she did not need to look at them. Her eyes locked on her brother, the one who had spent years mocking her, belittling her, and laughing at every effort she made. For the first time, he could not meet her gaze. His shoulders slumped, his arrogance gone. The room felt heavy with the weight of truth, and every eye followed Mecca as she took a step closer. "You mocked me," she said firmly, her voice steady, clear, and unshaken. "You mocked me for what you thought I didn't have. You believed silence meant weakness, and patience meant failure. But now you see, everything you underestimated in me was my strength all along." Her words cut through the silence like a blade, leaving no room for defense, no space for excuses. Nuru's lips trembled, but nothing came out. For the first time in his life, he had no words. The relatives who once sided with him now stared at Mecca with awe. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, ashamed of how easily they had joined in his arrogance. Others lowered their eyes completely,